Well, I can't believe this, but it happened, about last spring? I can't remember if it was February or March, but remember the story about the Supreme Court in its last session was considering the very divisive issue of abortion. And all of a sudden, there was a document that was leaked, basically taking a look at the ruling. And this hadn't happened for a long time in the Supreme Court. And, of course, it led to demonstrations and, calls for investigations. But where does that investigation stand now? What is going on in all of this? Well, joining us on our Newsmaker line to talk about it is Eric Lendrum. Eric is host of the Right Take podcast, also writes at The American Greatness about this. Eric, how are you? Welcome to the Rod Arquette Show. Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great, Rod. Thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be back.
All right. Where is the leaker? What do we know about the leaker, Eric?
The sad fact is that we just don't know. We know absolutely nothing whatsoever. And, of course, the media have been happy to let this story be completely forgotten. Just as a reminder of the timeline here, the leak of the decision in the case Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization to a Politico reporter happened on May 2nd of last year. That's over 8 months ago now. Despite the fact that Chief Justice John Roberts announced an investigation into the leak shortly after it happened, which was to be carried out by the court-martial, we still don't know anything 8 months later. At this point, it seems like Roberts and the court-martial might be trying to compete with John Durham for the most slow-rolled federal investigation in modern history.
Good point. Eric, there was a lot of criticism at the time of allowing Roberts and I guess the court-martial to do this investigation. There were some people who were saying it needs to be done by somebody from outside the court. Where does that argument stand?
I honestly can't imagine why they would think that would make any sense, other than that is simply an anti-institutional argument. This happened within the court. Of course, the court should be the one to investigate this. This obviously came from within the court. It's not like someone broke into the Supreme Court and stole the draft and gave it to Politico. This had to have come from the inside. That is just the fact of the matter that, of course, it's not pleasant to talk about because this is unprecedented. This was the biggest leak in the history of the Supreme Court. Never before has such a major decision been leaked prematurely to the press on especially a landmark case like this one, overturning Roe after 49 years. This has to be decided this has to be investigated by the court. But the fact that they haven't told us anything yet suggests, I think, if nothing else, they simply don't know. They have not found anything yet, which is astounding to me. And again, you certainly know for a fact, if this had been leaked by a conservative, we would already know the leaker's face, their name, their social security number. We would know everything about them by this point.
Eric, John Roberts has always been very concerned about the image and the integrity of the court. Is there a possibility he is slow-walking this investigation just to try and protect the court?
That is certainly a possibility. Again, Justice Roberts, say what you want about him, that he is not the most conservative justice. That's definitely a true statement at this point. But he always has been an institutionalist. He was enraged by this because, as I said, this was an unprecedented leak. This violated the institution and longstanding tradition of the court, of not just, of course, secrecy of big decisions, but this sense of camaraderie between the justices, even though they disagreed. Famously, I think Justice Scalia and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg were very good friends, despite being a complete opposite ends of the political spectrum. Now, of course, any of that semblance of civility just goes right out the window because it's quite clear why this happened. This was done by someone on the left in order to try to intimidate, to get, the left-wing base riled up, to intimidate the conservative justices into preventing this from happening. Conservative members of the court had no reason to leak this. It just would make no sense. So this was done blatantly to try to change the decision that was going to be made. And keep in mind, it's not just a matter of the political implications. The leaker in this case is most definitely guilty of either one of two or both crimes in the process. And that is stealing government property and or converting government records for personal use. The latter charge could carry a sentence of up to 10 years in federal prison.
What if it's found out, Eric, that a liberal justice on the court had a role in leaking this?
That actually could very well that could contribute to your theory, Rod. That is why Justice Roberts is slow rolling this. Because if it was a clerk, if it was an employee or an intern, even that's one thing. Then you could hypothetically theoretically throw them to the wolves. But if this turned out to actually be a justice, and again, there are only three of them. There's only three liberal justices on the court right now. that really would go a long way to undermine the sanctity of the court itself. That now, never mind the staff of the justices themselves may be drawn in to this partisan nonsense. And again, considering what happened in the aftermath, the actual laws that were broken are one thing, but you look at the socio-political fallout caused by this leak, as you mentioned, kind of like the BLM riots in 2020, we had one single event subsequently sparked a nationwide movement of protests and acts of violence. Pro-life pregnancy centers were firebombed, vandalized. You had, of course, the conservative justices all had protesters outside their homes, and it all culminated in a psychopath from California, a 26-year-old man named Nicholas John Roski, who flew all the way to Maryland with guns and zip ties and other things on his person with the intent to assassinate Justice Brett Kavanaugh. He now faces life in prison, by the way, but of course he's had the audacity to plead not guilty after he already confessed to the police upon his arrest. But we were at a point where a justice could have almost been assassinated because of what happened here. And the fact that the leaker still is not facing any justice whatsoever is just astounding. It's a mockery of the justice system.
Are you surprised that if they know the name of the leaker, that the name of the leaker has not been leaked yet, Eric?
Leaks never ever work out for the left. They always are leaks that damage the right. It's just, I guess maybe an exception with this whole Biden file stuff that's happening just now, but generally no. Whenever it involves the leftists, that is a tight ship. There are no leaks. When it comes to a leak against the conservative, there will be more leaks than the Iraqi Navy.
Final question for you, Eric. It's a great conversation, and thanks for joining us tonight. But shortly after this happened, Utah Senator Mike Lee was on the show, and Mike clerked for Justice Alito for a number of years, and he said, I think they know who it is. They're just trying to figure out as to how to get to the person. Do you think they really do know who it is?
That is definitely a possibility. Again, the Supreme Court, among the justices themselves, they've always been a tight-knit community. Clarence Thomas has close friends on the court. As I said, Justices Scalia and Ginsburg were close friends despite their differences. I think that is certainly a possibility. It's almost like a family in its own way. So that is definitely a possibility. And I almost feel bad for them in that sense that, it's almost like having to discipline a member of your family at that point, or just a really close friend you've known for many years. But it's that matter of, again, if it is one of the justices, and again, federal laws are broken here. How do you punish a Supreme Court, assuming it's one of the sitting justices, and maybe not Justice Breyer, who was retired by this point? How do you even go about punishing an incumbent justice? Does the Senate have to vote on impeaching them? How would that be done? It's never been done before.
Well, it took us years to find out who Deep Throat was. It may take us years to find out who the Supreme Court leaker was as well, Eric, right? Never know.
That's right.
All right, Eric.
Maybe decades from now, maybe, yeah.
Maybe. All right. Eric, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. You too, Rod.
All right. On our Newsmaker line, Eric Lendrum. Eric is the host of the Right Take podcast, article in the American Greatness today, talking about the identity of the leaker from the Supreme Court when it came to that abortion decision. As Eric pointed out, it happened back in May. The decision was handed down at the end of June. Everybody was promising a full-blown investigation to find out what happened. It was unprecedented, and we still don't know who it is today.